Well, the Supreme Court issued another major ruling on gay marriage today, aside from California's Prop 8. The High Court striking down a key component to the Federal Defense of Marriage Act, or DOMA. Justice Kennedy argued essentially that DOMA was encroaching on the state's power to protect its citizens if the state approves same-sex marriage, writing, quote, "When the state used its historic and essential authority to define the marital relation in this way, its role and its power in making the decision enhanced the recognition, dignity, and protection of the class in their own community. DOMA, because of its reach and extent, departs from this history and tradition of reliance on state law to define marriage." Let's bring in Sally Cohn. She's a Fox News contributor and who has served as an advocate for gay rights. Ryan Anderson is the co-author of the book, What is Marriage? Man and Woman and Defense. Welcome to you both today.
Nice to see you.
We have a lot of issues to work through here, and I don't want to start a conversation on the merits of same-sex marriage or not. What I'd like to talk about today is the role of government, because that's a theme we see in a lot of our big stories, whether it's immigration or healthcare or anything else. And it seems that the Supreme Court today really made a big statement about that relationship. And Sally, you just wrote a piece that just went up on foxnews.com, fits in perfectly with this, titled "What Same-Sex Marriage Decision Tells Us About America and the Constitution." What do you think it tells us?
I mean, look, this fits within our long history as a nation of striving toward making a more perfect union. We know that throughout our history, we've never quite gotten there. We've had times in our history where we have legally treated certain groups of people as though they were superior to other groups of people, and we've over time worked to address that. This is what the court is doing right now, is fundamentally recognizing that you cannot pass laws under our Constitution, under our American values. You cannot pass laws solely for the purpose of discriminating. I would also add they're also doing it in a very clever way, where they're relying on this sort of states' rights argument that were this any other issue, conservatives would be cheering, but in this case, somehow conservatives want the federal government to step on the toes of the states.
Well, Ryan, to that point, Scalia, in his dissenting argument, actually said this. He said that the Supreme Court was overstepping its bounds and overruling what elected representatives have already put forward as representatives of the public. What do you think of what Sally has to say? And again, how we're looking at this relationship between the judicial branch, the federal government, the state government, and the local community?
Yeah, well, Justice Scalia got it right. The federal government has constitutional authority to define marriage for federal purposes and for federal policies, just as the 50 states have authority to define marriage for state purposes and for state policies. What gets the Constitution wrong is if you say that the states can impose their definition on the federal government. So the court as a whole, they kind of issued a contradictory ruling today, saying the states are free to define marriage how they want, and yet they didn't allow the citizens of California, who went to the ballot box twice, to pass a law defining marriage as the union of a man and a woman so that children can have moms and dads. They didn't uphold that law. They said that the citizens of California didn't have standing to defend their law, and yet they then say that in the DOMA decision that states should be sovereign to define marriage for state purposes.
So, Ryan, where do you think the individual turns to the government for that definition about what marriage is? Is the appropriate debate in the local community, in the city? Is it in the state government, or is it in the federal government ultimately?
Well, it's both. The states have to define marriage for state law and the federal government for federal law. And what's important here is to say, why is government in the marriage business? Government's not in the marriage business because it cares about the love life of consenting adults. Marriage isn't just about romance. The reason that government's in the marriage business is because the union of a man and a woman can produce a child, and children need a mom and a dad. And marriage is the institution that ensures that that takes place. Well, Sally, maximizes the likelihood.
Sally, I want to bring you in on this now. Since we've had this ruling about federal benefits, so we have this when it comes to tax policy. This is one of the reasons why this debate came up regarding DOMA, because of the federal benefits that if you were a same-sex couple in a state like New York, you were not able to get. Beyond this, do you believe that another argument should come before the Supreme Court, that the Supreme Court should make a sweeping statement on marriage and marriage rights in this country? Is that the right place for this debate to go next? Or is it something that should take place in the states, and we have a country where maybe there's half the states say it's legal and half the states say it isn't.
I mean, I think we'll get there eventually anyway, one way or the other. So either there will be a challenge to the many efforts in states that have tried to ban marriage equality, or the states will eventually get there on their own. You know, the reality here is the reason we have, what the government has said is, and what I have a constitution for is to say, you cannot make laws. You are not allowed to make laws in this country that are solely for the purpose of discrimination. And no matter all the excuses that Ryan wants to put forward, that's what's happening here. It's saying we want to treat families like mine as legally second-class status to other families. And it's not just for purposes of child rearing and so forth, although I also have a child. It's also for tax policy and immigration policy and hospital visitation and 1,000 federal benefits, most of which have nothing to do with anything but, you know, conferring rights on loving couples.
So I want to get Ryan. We're going to have to run, but I just want to make sure Ryan has a chance to respond.
Sure.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Citizens in the state of California went to the ballot box twice to pass a law that tells the truth about marriage, that it's a union of a man and a woman. And so we have laws like that in 38 states. The Supreme Court today rejected the argument that those laws are unconstitutional. The Supreme Court said today that those laws aren't violations of equal protection because the union of a man and a woman is different than the union of two men or two women. Only the union of a man and a woman can produce a child, and only that union can provide a child with a mom and a dad. So marriage laws recognize that reality, and they promote it as the ideal.
It's interesting, though, to mention California, because the voters went and made that decision, but then the elected officials made a different decision. So here we're seeing all these different layers, right? Just real quick, I want to get your final thoughts on this.
In a democracy, it's, you know, it's by the people. The people at the end of the day.
That's the final question, guys. Do you think this should be on a national ballot? Do you see this issue as somehow having a place on a national forum and just being about the people and the voters?
Jenna, apart from the fact that I'm a little confused as to how my right to marry affects Ryan at all, unless we're getting married, Ryan, I'm not quite clear how, you know, look, you're entitled to your personal opinions. Everyone is. And I think this and all the cases make clear churches, individuals get to do what they want. It also says that our government cannot discriminate. We don't legislate in this country based on popular opinion or on ideals when it comes to rights.
So not a national vote.
We legislate based on the common good.
It's not based on popularity.
We legislate based on the common good, and we leave all Americans free to live and to love how they choose. So in every state, two people of the same sex can love each other and live with each other. Nothing about that's illegal. The question is, are we going to redefine marriage and then force a new definition of marriage on all citizens, on religious groups, and on businesses?
And that's a big question.
Where, if that's going to happen, it should be democratically. It shouldn't come through the courts.
It'll be interesting to talk about that, because just so our viewers know, once again, that's the one thing that the Supreme Court did not do today. There was no sweeping statement overall about marriage in general, and that's a debate we'll continue to have. We hope to have you both back. Hopefully no marriages between the two of you, because I guess we'd have to put you on camera together or something like that. Sally and Ryan,
thanks for having us today.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Two more